You're listening to Addiction Medicine Beyond the Abstract, the official podcast of the Journal of Addiction Medicine. If this is your first time listening, thanks for coming. Addiction Medicine Beyond the Abstract is produced for your enjoyment and is focused on the latest journal-published research and science in the field of addiction medicine. Remember to add us to your favorites on iTunes, and you can also follow us on Twitter at ASAM.org and Facebook. Now let's go beyond the abstract. Welcome once again to another episode of Beyond the Abstract. Hey, we appreciate you being here with us today. We've got yet another great interview for you. We recently sat down with Dr. Manish Jha to discuss his new article featured in the March-April issue of the Journal of Addiction Medicine. It's titled Craving, Impulsivity, and Subsequent Methamphetamine Use with Naltrexone-Bupropion versus Placebo, Findings from a Randomized Clinical Trial. In this episode, Dr. Jha discusses his secondary analysis of the ADAPT-2 trial and the investigation into the relationship between craving and impulsivity and the transition from positive to negative urine drug screen results. He also shares insight into how treatments like extended-release injectable naltrexone and oral bupropion can potentially work in tandem to reduce craving and impulsivity to treat methamphetamine use disorder. But before we dive into our talk, let's take a moment and learn more about today's guest. Dr. Manish Jha is an associate professor of psychiatry and O'Donnell Clinical Neuroscience Scholar at UT Southwestern Medical Center, Dallas, Texas. He received his medical degree from the Maulana Azad Medical College in New Delhi, India, and completed his psychiatry residency training at UT Southwestern. In his clinical practice, he provides care to individuals with treatment-refractory mood disorders and substance use disorders. His program of research is focused on developing novel interventions for psychiatric disorders, personalizing the use of currently available treatments, and bringing these scientific discoveries to clinical practice. He has a National Institute of Mental Health funded Career Development Award to elucidate the neurocircuit mechanisms of irritability in adults with major depressive disorder that uses ketamine as a pharmacological probe. He serves as the site principal investigator at UT Southwestern of NIDA-funded studies of ketamine for methamphetamine use disorder and combination of extended-release naltrexone and bupropion for methamphetamine use disorder. He has also authored and co-authored over 195 manuscripts. All right, now let's get into today's talk with Dr. Manish Jha. Addiction medicine, why of all things? Addiction medicine, what was it that led you to the field, and what have your experiences working in addiction medicine been like up to this point?
Yeah, I hope I can call you Zach.
Absolutely.
So Zach, I'm a psychiatrist by training. I went to medical school in India. Then I did my adult psychiatry residency here. And my research was mainly focused on mood disorders. So I was involved with developing of new treatments, including running phase 3 trials for new medications for treatment-resistant depression. And as doing this work, I really got interested in understanding the symptom domain, the expression of what we call irritability. Now, as you study the irritability, or as I started studying it, I realized that mood disorders was not the only domain where that was relevant. So that brought me into studying other disorders, and that's where I started working in the field of addiction medicine, really to try to understand irritability better. And as I started doing that, it became really obvious quite quickly that the skills I had developed for doing clinical trials were very relevant. We're like trying to develop new medications, and we have no medications FDA approved for any stimulant use disorder, many other substance use disorders. So I really have focused for the past 3-4 years in really developing newer treatments for individuals with either methamphetamine use disorder or cocaine use disorder, but hopefully with broader substance use disorder. And that's how I got involved in doing things for individuals with addictions or substance use disorders.
Amazing. Well, you've got a really interesting study here that we're going to talk about today, and I want to jump right into this. So your article, it states that this study was a secondary analysis of the ADAPT-2 trial, and that it was unplanned. So tell me, what led you to investigate these relationships between craving and impulsivity and the transition from positive to negative urine drug screen results?
So yeah, initially it was not an idea to look at this analysis that we did. So we thought about it. And again, the key aspects of ADAPT-2 trial was that it was a large randomized control trial. It was published now 5 years ago in the New England Journal of Medicine that this medication combination called naltrexone, injectable naltrexone and oral bupropion is more effective than placebo. So those big papers and other outcomes, and there was a secondary outcome in ADAPT-2 showing that it led led to reduction of craving. The medication led to the reduction in craving. But as I got involved into it, trying to think about it, that how do these changes happen? What is the impact of craving on methamphetamine use? How do these features, symptoms, what we call impulsivity, acting without forethought, how do these affect the use? So those questions in our collective heads were percolating, and that led to this set of questions that we asked here. And that's why it was not planned beforehand when the study started. But here with this paper, we decided to look at the interface of these three constructs, right? Methamphetamine use, impulsivity, and craving. And we brought these things together in the secondary analysis in this paper that we published.
So walk us and our listeners through this. Can you describe the associations that you ended up finding between craving, impulsivity, and subsequent UDS, or urine drug screen analysis for methamphetamine?
So before I go into that, I will orient our listeners first that when we are measuring treatment outcomes for addictions like methamphetamine use disorder, we have multiple ways that we can measure it. We can ask people, did you use? How much did you use? Those kind of things. Or we can do a urine test. Right? So urine test for how methamphetamine is, typically the half-life could be such that we need to collect urine sample at least twice a week. Otherwise, we may miss out on use episodes if we don't have the urine collected at least twice a week. So in the ADAPT-2 trial, people came in, they were randomized, we'll look at the first 6 weeks of treatment, and they provided urine sample twice a week. Now, when they provided urine sample twice a week, on one of the visits of that urine sample, we also asked about their craving, simple scale, a 0 to 100 scale, visual analog scale. Higher is the worst craving for methamphetamine in the past week. So that was one item available. For impulsivity, we had simple 2-item measure asking about their impulsivity symptoms. So it was self-rated, how impulsive within the past week on a simple Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So these are the scales that we have available. And so what we very simply asked that on a given week, what was the person's urine drug screen status? So did their urine test positive for methamphetamine or did it test negative for methamphetamine? So people who had a positive urine drug screen at methamphetamine, then we asked what was their craving at that time, right? So if urine is positive for methamphetamine and we have different severity of craving available at that time point, how does that craving impact that person's next urine sample that week, right? Because again, we have 2 weeks, so next urine sample. So higher craving, is it predicting lower likelihood of going from a positive urine sample to a negative urine sample, right? So that's 1 week. And within the person, we can do it over time. So week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, right? So that's how we can structure that. And so the first question we asked was that does the higher level of craving or do the levels of craving, do they impact the next urine sample, right? So that's going from positive to negative, right? And because we had 2 treatments, right, in the study, we randomized people to either receive Naltrexone-Bupropion combination or medication combination. The first question we asked was that, does this association between craving and subsequent methamphetamine use, right, does it vary based on treatment arm, right? And this is where probably like the most interesting finding of our paper is that association between craving and subsequent methamphetamine use going from positive to negative differed between the 2 treatment arms. So initially, early in the treatment, people who had low craving were more likely to transition to a negative urine test. So going from positive to negative was more common in those who had low craving as compared to those who had high craving early on. What we noticed was that in individuals who got placebo, this association went away. So with subsequent later in the treatment, the effect of craving on the use was really not there. Whereas in the active medication arm, this association became stronger. So those with lower craving versus higher craving in the active medication arm, that effect actually became stronger. So that was the differential impact we found, that the association between lower craving and higher likelihood of or lower craving resulting in higher likelihood of transitioning to a negative urine sample became stronger with time in the active combination. That association just went away in the placebo arm.
I want to talk too about, tell me a little bit about this, the combination of extended release injectable naltrexone and oral bupropion seems like a promising tool in the treatment of methamphetamine use disorder, or MUD. So tell me, how do they work in tandem to kind of reduce craving and impulsivity to help treat MUD?
So as many things happen, naltrexone is meant to be this medication, has kind of quote unquote anti-craving or anti-addictive potential, right? So the combination, not the injector and medication, but just the oral tablet of naltrexone and oral tablet of bupropion in a specific dose strength is actually approved for the treatment of obesity, right? So I will refrain from using the brand name, but the oral naltrexone, oral bupropion is an anti-obesity, helps people lose weight, right? And this leads us to thinking about, and Dr. Volkow, the director of NIDA, and others have published on probably these anti-craving circuits, so medications that affect sort of like addiction-related, craving-related mechanisms may have an effect on it. So we saw that signal. Now, whenever we use combination, we can theorize and hypothesize all we want, but there is no way to disentangle it, right? We started both medications together at the same time. So naltrexone injection and oral bupropion, all of them got started at the same time. So really it's difficult to disentangle it, but we expect some effect on craving. And that's what we saw, that the medication combination resulted in greater reduction in craving. Bupropion is an antidepressant medication, so unrelated to this paper, we had done a secondary analysis in another paper where we showed actually that this combination resulted in greater reduction in depression. So people who were active medication, it actually reduced the overall depression severity. So we gave a combination medication which we thought and we observed was expected to do a broad effect things, right? Like it was going to affect craving also, probably affect mood also, hopefully symptoms of impulsivity also. So we were expecting these broad effects to be there, and with this combination, and hopefully they then together result in the improvement that was observed in actually people not using methamphetamine. So that's why the primary outcome of ADAPT-2 was, over a 2-week period of time, do people actually provide negative samples for urine for methamphetamine? So really, that was the primary outcome. That's how it was defined before the study got started. So we believe, and what we cannot answer is, are there synergistic effect, right? Do these together work better than each of them by themselves? So again, there are some of the unanswered questions, but definitely these medications do have potential effects both on craving as well as mood-related symptoms. And if we rate impulsivity in that, then we expect the combination to work on both ends.
So, I also want to ask too about medications for the treatment of substance use disorders. They've historically gained FDA approval based mainly on measures of drug abstinence. But do you think that there would be benefits to considering endpoints like impulsivity and craving for the approval process of candidate treatments for methamphetamine use disorder and other substance use disorders?
Yeah, so again, because when we talk about medication approvals, we are looking at what the United States Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, has guidance on. And in 2023, FDA actually issued a draft guidance, right? So this is really FDA's guidance to industry for developing drugs. So again, FDA has a different process for drugs as it has for devices. So, but one assumes that it sort of like applies there together. So there are some really key interesting aspects of that draft guidance for stimulants. So with cocaine or methamphetamine or prescription stimulants, and FDA does want development to happen specifically for whatever the disorder is being studied, right? So either for methamphetamine use disorder or cocaine use disorder or prescription stimulant use disorder. So the FDA's recommendation is that it has to be that primary is that. Then the guidance is about what sort of like stage of the illness is being studied, if the treatment is being studied for really leading people, treating them acutely, right? So someone who's very actively using, and how does their use change? So FDA is very clear, right, that abstinence is not their only outcome that they're interested in. But FDA is also clear that just self-report with timeline follow-back may not be adequate. So it is self-report with some biochemical validation or some biological testing. So I encourage our listeners to go read that guidance. It's very helpful. But FDA also actually offers another primary endpoint. So FDA is encouraging people to think about moving someone who's moderate or severe substance use, very active, to maybe attaining early remission. So again, early remission is not defined by FDA, it's defined by American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5 text revision TR. So that's how the early remission is. But FDA offers in their draft guidance that early remission may be an acceptable primary endpoint. So there are various things, but in the meanwhile, in other substance use disorders like alcohol or opioid use disorders, there have been movement towards other ways of. So there was a very impactful publication recently with alcohol, where there are other outcomes may be acceptable in the field of opioid use disorder. Very actively, new tools are being developed to assess craving. So I think that more work is needed to really develop these other outcomes that would be acceptable to FDA. And I do hope that we do that work so that we have measures for craving that would be acceptable to FDA as an outcome. We are not there yet.
It's really interesting. I want to look ahead a little bit too, and I'm curious about future research questions. What emerged from the secondary analysis of the ADAPT-2 trial? And looking ahead, what kind of research studies do you think might be able to address the questions that came up?
So we can talk a long time about what we think should be done. But if craving is one of the factors, right? So maybe what if we could develop treatments that could target craving more precisely? Right? So by that I mean, if we can really understand people, what are the brain circuits, if we were doing imaging studies to really, and then provoke craving within the scanner to really understand these brain circuits better, then maybe we can target the brain circuits directly, right? So there are many tools to target brain circuits directly. We have magnetic stimulation or transcranial magnetic stimulation that can be done. We have electrical stimulation. FDA recently cleared a transcranial direct current stimulation for treatment of depression, so that could be potentially a tool. Then we also have other more novel tools like focused ultrasound. So there is really a lot of excitement for focused ultrasound because it can target deeper brain circuits in more precise fashion. There are more invasive ways of targeting brain directly, for example, deep brain stimulation. So there are all these treatment tools that are available that could more precisely target craving. So that's one exciting additional. The other exciting additional thing could be, I broadly hinted at the anti-craving treatments, and I brought two treatments for obesity, and now we have these medications that are really effective, what we call the GLP-1 drugs, right? So they are really GLP-1 treatments. They're quite effective in reducing weight, and they are also gaining a lot of interest as novel treatments for addiction. There was a paper that one of my close colleagues, Christian Hendershot, published last year showing semaglutide, a GLP-1 drug used for diabetes and weight loss, being effective in reducing alcohol use, right? So there is a lot of interest in that broad class of medication. And then the third class of medication I want to bring up is, I'd already told you that this combination reduced depression, maybe impulsivity. So maybe we can go at it from that angle also and start studying medications that may be more effective, novel medications that may be targeting these affective symptoms more directly, and that may be leading to an improvement in substance use outcomes, right? So I think at least these three broad things are things that we are very excited about, and these are some of the things that we are studying right now.
I want to shift gears now as we come to the close of our episode. We have a tradition. We like to ask our guests for a little bit of wisdom and advice. So, I mean, again, this has already been such a wealth of great information. I'm sure our listeners are going to love it. But I want to cap it off with some advice that you want to share. So, tell me, doctor, what advice might you give to your younger self, as well as the next generation of addiction medicine practitioners and clinicians? What do you wish you knew when you started, and what do you want to impart onto them as they enter their journey into this field?
So one thing I would want to tell my younger self was to focus more on measurement-based care in the setting of addiction, right? So we do use some measurement-based care, but we are too focused on urine testing, right? Whether in clinic or research studies, we are doing urine tests because that's a biological test that is there. But focusing on these other things like craving, right? Impulsivity, depression, these other things, if we incorporate that as part of our measurement-based care tool. So every time I'm evaluating a person, I'm treating them, I'm monitoring them, how they are doing over a period of time, the more and more we can incorporate these measures, the more we get a better and fuller picture of whether a change is happening. Are we moving in the right direction? Do we need to change treatments? So really, I think that's one of the important things that I would go back and start incorporating them in the measurement-based care. To other people in similar career stage or earlier career stage, I also want to really tell them that these large clinical trials, they take a lot of work, so many people being involved, and the data that gets generated, if we apply ourselves, we can come up and find other nuances, other hypothesis generating things by looking at these data that are generated as part of these large clinical trials. Why do I bring it up? Because NIDA, the funding agency that funded the ADAPT-2 trial, actually makes the data publicly available. So you don't really even need to be one of the researchers of these studies to go get the data set, understand the study, formulate the questions, find someone who can do the statistical analysis to really answer those questions, and then publish. So I really also want to encourage this valuable resource that NIDA has provided to all of us as a scientific community, where these research study data are now publicly available for people with to really go and start formulating hypotheses and testing them from these data sets.
Doctor, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Thank you for the advice. Thank you for all the information. And it's been a really great chat today. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Addiction Medicine Beyond the Abstract. All of today's show links can be found in the show notes. And remember, you can preview additional abstracts at journalofaddictionmedicine.com. This program was produced by the American Society of Addiction Medicine.